Breakfast. Yeah. Good morning. This is Bryan Betz, your host. I'm with Pastor Andy Littleton. Thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Yeah, you got it. Interesting thing is, so Faith Over Breakfast is kind of based out of conversations that my buddy Eric and Eric from a church called The Village in Tucson, Arizona, that we had during breakfast conversations over about, 6 months while we were on a radio show. So this is he's gone. He's on vacation. Eric's not here.
Well-deserved vacation.
Well-deserved vacation. And so Bryan, our new and very capable host, and I are here. And that intro was just different because Eric's not here, and we decided we can do whatever we want.
Yeah.
And so
there's nothing else holding us back.
There's nothing holding us back. Eric always eats breakfast before he gets here, even though it's Faith Over Breakfast. So we didn't eat breakfast before he got here. Yeah. We have our breakfast right here.
I was waiting patiently for Andy. I was about to criticize you, and then I called you Eric because I'm exhausted. No, that's all good. I like how I said my mistake was all good. But yeah, it's really nice to eat breakfast and talk at the same time.
It's great. I've heard on podcasting forums that what the listeners want is to hear you eating. That's like a thing that it's the new trend, guys. Like
just going down to town on some eggs and bread.
Yeah. You got an egg and 2 slices of bread, which is solid breakfast. Yeah. I got a sandwich and I got a cortado. We're at Exo Coffee, by the way. We're in Tucson, Arizona, and Tucson is what is our new title? UNESCO World City of Gastronomy here in Tucson.
That sounds incredible, and I did not know that.
You didn't know that? Yeah.
From my personal experience, I've just noticed that there's a lot of amazing places in Tucson, independent places, coffee shops, markets, just great eateries that I love, that makes Tucson great. And Exo Coffee is one of them.
Yeah.
They don't have regular bacon, which I was surprised about.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. So that whole distinction that we have has to do with all of the native foods and the unique foods that you'll find here. That there really is like an amazing array of excellent food in the Tucson area, and that's no joke. For somebody who's grown up here, I can attest to that. Exo Coffee. This is a newer place in the Tucson landscape, and they haven't been serving food for that long. But what I will say is they do like native local ingredients, so they're not going to just have everything in stock. They have fresh stuff. I mean, I think the guy who's down there making food also is like he's like a farm to table guy here in Tucson who helps other businesses get fresh food. We've got mesquite beans. You hear that?
Yep.
Yeah, on our table. Because we're sitting up in the loft. Well, I don't think it is for aesthetic. Simply because here at Exo they harvest mesquite beans. They have a mesquite coffee.
Oh, that's incredible.
They've maybe a pastry. So they utilize these crazy desert beans that most people in the Tucson area just consider a hassle that are in their yard, and they eat them. And here at Exo, they don't waste them. They put them to use. And they're actually really good. I've had mesquite pancakes here in Tucson. And I will say our goats love mesquite beans. So maybe we should listen to our goats.
Well, next time I'll definitely try it so I can kind of give people a proper review of the mesquite beans. I'm sure it's going to be incredible because everything that I've had so far has been terrific here.
Yeah.
But I was saying more the aesthetic of the mesquite beans it's for us, and they use it like the way that it's meant to be.
Yes, so we should clarify. We're up in the loft. So Exo Coffee, there's a loft here in the back they let us use for this podcast. We're really grateful. We just want to say thank you to Doug and Amy and the crew here at Exo for being hospitable to us, making great food, just being an awesome place here in our community. And they don't just put mesquite beans all over the tables. Okay, it's up here in the loft because they're working on projects. But thank you for your business and everything you do. And we just appreciate you guys. And thanks for letting us podcast here. and and have our little space, up top here where there's not so much noise. Because we did some old recordings, Eric and I. We tried to do Faith Over Breakfast in other restaurants, and there was a lot of background noise. It was a bad idea.
Yeah. But good conversations we missed out on because of it too.
Yeah, the world missed out, and we're all very sorry.
But we're going to have other conversations that are incredible. But today, we do not have Pastor Eric Stephen.
No.
And something that we will do with Pastor Eric Stephen when the time comes is talk to him about who he is and how he got into ministry and how he got to where he is today. Mm-hmm. And since we have Andy here, and it's just him and I am hoping to get to the bottom of who he is today. And
oh boy.
I know.
This could be new for me.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. It'll be very critical. It's going to be very difficult. No. We're going to find out who you are. So, Andy, where were you born?
Yeah, I was born in Corvallis, Oregon, which was, we lived in a small town called Lebanon, Oregon, up on a hill. We had blackberry bushes. We had a goat back then, when I was a kid. And, so I was born in a small town. My dad was in the lumber industry in Oregon. My mom owned a small bookstore with her friend. And, we were small town folk. And then we were there about 6 years before. Now, are you ready for this to get interesting?
I'm so ready.
Oh, okay, wow.
I think it's interesting now.
It's already interesting?
Yeah, of course.
So, when I was about 6, my parents had a lifelong dream. My dad had been reading Peter Jenkins' books on walking. So I don't know if you ever heard of Walk Across America or any of that. So he'd been reading that kind of stuff. So he wanted to walk across America. My mom wasn't quite ready for that, the walking, but she was ready for the across America, I guess. And so she wanted to see more of the country. And so they decided that, while I was young and, before I went into grade school and things got more complicated, I suppose, that they wanted to travel the United States. And so they sold our property and bought a motorhome, a Jamboree. And the plan was to travel all 50 states, live in each state for a little while, and experience life there, and then decide where to live after that. And so they bought the motorhome and set off. Well, this journey proved to be a little more difficult than expected because there wasn't like a big savings for this. Okay, it was like we're going to get a job in California and live there for a little while, and then we'll move. Then we'll go to the next state and the next state and the next state. So we did, Oregon coast, Washington, California. I feel like we did Nevada. We got down to Arizona, and my mom wasn't feeling so good. Had to have some surgery. We got a big bill from the hospital, and we were staying on my aunt's property here in Tucson, Arizona. She had some property. There was some family in the area.
That's nice.
And decided maybe we better pay this bill off and just wait a little while. And guess what? We never left. That's how I ended up in Tucson. So we did not travel all of the United States. We got through a few states. And,
you saw quite a bit. There's a lot to see in those places, too.
Yeah.
What was your favorite, if you can remember, all the way back then?
Yeah, I was pretty young. I have little memories. My dad got a job for Ocean Spray Cranberries in Washington, and so he harvested cranberries out of the cranberry bogs. And I feel like it was up in Oregon. He got a job harvesting oysters, which terrified me because he had to go out on the ocean on a raft, and he didn't know how to swim, so that terrified me. But it's, I don't remember a ton about the little towns. I have snippets of memories. I feel like my memories of being in California were kind of boring, like not just like the wow California life, but more like my dad he loaded trucks, and so I vaguely remember that. I remember being in a huge storm on a bridge, a very big bridge in our motorhome, and I was sure we were going to die because we were driving this big motorhome, the wind was blowing, the bridge was moving, one of those deals, and I was like, we're going to die. This is my life is over. Thanks a lot, Mom and Dad. So yeah, little stuff like that. And then I remember, sadly, when we showed up in Tucson, it was super hot. And so Tucson gets really hot. We broke a record yesterday for the date, and we went over 115 for the sixth time in our history, in our recorded history.
Yeah.
All I can say is thank goodness we don't live in Phoenix.
Yeah, because that was 120
degrees in Phoenix, Arizona.
50 flights canceled.
Flights canceled for heat.
Because they're running, maximum running temperature is 118 degrees.
Yeah.
So, which is
unbelievable,
less than 120.
So we showed up in Tucson in the summer, and we're from the Pacific Northwest, and all we had was a motorhome, no car. So we parked it and lived in it, and we're taking the bus and walking around. And I just remember my parents just essentially being like, "This is the worst place in the world," right? And so our arrival in Tucson wasn't this like, hey, what a great, this must be a UNESCO city of gastronomy. How great is this? We showed up here and we're like, we've read about hell in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
This might be it. Like, we're close. Like, this is horrible. And so sadly, like that and some other things, when my parents showed up here, they'd kind of failed. Like, in a way, like they'd set out on this great adventure. They were going to see the world or the states and all this, and it didn't work. And they had debt, and it was hot, and they didn't want to live on my aunt's property. That wasn't the plan. The plan was to go travel around and buy a place, and it turned out it blew up, and we lost all our money and had a motorhome that depreciated in value that nobody wanted. Right? It's like the state of my family getting here was one of failure.
How did your parents' response impact you? I'm sure that was incredibly difficult for them to, because they also want to set an example for you,
right?
But also, what a terrible situation to be in, and not be accustomed to the heat.
Oh yeah,
and
knowing really nobody other than my aunt. Yeah, it's it was hard for them, and I look back and what would I do with that? Like, I had this great idea. It seemed like it was going to be so fun, and it seemed like I would get to write the next Travel Across America book or whatever. And it turned out nobody's going to read this book. Actually, like the book we're writing is what not to do and how to lose all your money. And it was hard. My parents, didn't just do it well. Like, they were kind of frustrated. And so my dad, he worked in lumber in Oregon, which was a great industry. What do you do with lumber in Tucson, Arizona? The lumber we have is saguaro cactuses that are illegal to cut down. There aren't lumber mills around here. Yeah. And so he did some day labor sort of work at first, which was very humbling, and then ended up working at a good old standby Grant Road Lumber here, but it paid a fraction of what he made in Oregon.
Yeah.
And it was like, he's working with immigrants and people who just don't have any options, and he's going, oh shoot, like, I don't have options here. I had back, because he'd been in lumber his whole life, he knew what he was doing with that, but here he didn't have options. And my mom, she'd owned her own business, and so she went and worked for one of the public school systems in the library, and that was okay. But overall, life was hard. We ended up, actually up until a few years ago, we were mobile home dwellers. My parents, they bought their first home in their 70s. In their 70s, they bought their first house. But that whole hit and not having the education and everything was hard. We lived in pretty dumpy mobile home parks in Tucson. Some of my memories of being here were waking up in the middle of the night because our two neighbors were out just bashing alcohol bottles over each other and yelling and screaming, and me being afraid and not knowing what to do with that, and being ashamed of my home and where I lived, and So because we didn't grow up in this like cycle of poverty situation, this was like a shocking. We were just dropped into this, and so it was so different for us. And we were there for a while, like in that situation for a while, and it was hard. It was confusing. My parents, they really wanted me to go to a good school, so they like put me in little better schools and put some of their very little money there. But then that also meant like I was around a bunch of really wealthy people at school, and so I just didn't tell anybody where I lived. I lied about where I got my clothes. Just tried to, just kind of act like that wasn't our life. And so it was like a big deal. If I let a friend see where I lived, it's like I trusted them a lot. And sometimes I felt like that kind of backfired on me, because then they would come over and be like, oh, like what? This is your house? Or try to make light of it, and one friend, it was kind of funny. And he was ragging on me too. This is when I was in high school, but he just was like, hey, where's the steering wheel? Like where? I think I hit him. I was like, you jerk. But that was like, there was a deep wound there for me, because I was afraid that that would be the first thing somebody noticed when they came over and picked me up or whatever, was that I lived in this dumpy little mobile home.
Did that define you in quite a way?
Yes, like big time. And this is like, we're talking up until, so I'm 34 now. Mid 20s for me, mid to late 20s. I was doing some kind of counseling work. I'd been through some really hard stuff, and this very issue came up. And so Eric's dad, Eric Seepin, who's not here, his dad is a counselor in town, and he keyed in on this with me at a men's retreat. And he said something to the degree of like, or actually he pulled me aside outside of the retreat, and he said, you got a chip on your shoulder toward the wealthy. And I said, I don't know, and he's like, no. And it was cool, because he said, Andy, I have it too, and I see it, and you're going to have to face this. Now hold on, quick note. In our podcast, we have a sound bite. It's a train, and it means that Brian has a thought. See, I just hit the button. You hear it?
Yep.
You hear that train
exactly.
going by?
Every time that I'm about to speak, a train happens, and you miss the wonderful wisdom that I wanted to give you. And unfortunately, we just missed it. But I'm sure it'll come back to me. Mm-hmm. One time earlier, right before the podcast, it was very, very long train sound the entire time, and it lasted for like a few minutes. And afterwards, it basically I could have said my entire testimony in the midst of it. So that was always the joke. Whenever a train happens, I just shared probably the most profound thing God has ever taught me.
And nobody heard it.
Nobody heard it.
Oh, well. The truth is, I just wanted to take a bite of my sandwich, Brian.
I know. I noticed that, and I'm so sorry. We don't, because if I can usually just, I'll pass it off to Eric and give Andy room to enjoy his delicious meal.
This is where faith over breakfast gets complicated.
I know.
It's when there's only two of you and you're talking, and your sandwich is just saying, eat me.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway,
but it tastes good.
Oh yeah, it's actually really good.
Okay, that's good.
I'll get back to that.
Yeah, for sure.
I got a bite. It's leaving me wanting more.
Take another. It's okay.
Oh,
before we really dive into it.
Maybe I will, because this is going to get real.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
My food is delicious. I only got an egg and some barrio bread with some butter, and it's amazing. Barrio bread's a local staple in Tucson as well. And everywhere I go, that like different markets, stuff like that, they're usually selling barrio bread, and it's delicious every single time.
Don at Barrio Bread, thank you for your business and everything you do. And your bread's amazing, and we appreciate it.
Shout out to Don.
Shout out to Don.
We're
just shouting out.
Yeah.
Shout out to everybody. Shout out to Eric, who's gone on vacation.
Yeah. Well deserved rest.
And shout out to his dad, John, who called me out on my issues. So here we go. So back into that
for sure. So he has an organization through Potter's Wheel. Did you actually go through counseling through Potter's Wheel?
So his organization's called Journey Companions.
Journey Companions.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then he has levels of what he does. So one level is called Learning to Love the Master, and that's where it's usually either men or women. They work through their story. So they write their story, and they're engaging with God along the way. Where was God? Where were you? Why did this occur? What were you teaching me? Kind of interrogating their own story and asking God to reveal himself in the midst of that, guided by Scripture, inviting him into it, and then allowing the other people in the group to inquire into that as well. So that's Learning to Love the Master. They do counseling, they do private counseling. And then Potter's Wheel is kind of another level above that, where essentially you learn to really walk with other people. So you're engaging with them. They'll bring up an event or something that's going on, and then you are working with a group. So those people can ask you questions and give thoughts, and then one person's the emphasis, and then the wheel turns, and another person is the emphasis, and you kind of learn how to pursue each other and seek God together through this. And they're really incredible resources. John and Patty Seepin have been a gift to our community, no doubt. Obviously, they've left their son to lead a church here and other things. So John and Patty they've been amazing. And so this was a Learning to Love the Master retreat, is what it was. And some little stuff in my story triggered John to say, you have a real chip on your shoulder toward the wealthy. And the interesting thing is that I was working at probably the wealthy church in Tucson. And and this is, now we're getting all probably the further questions are all getting tied in here. But I'll just say quickly, I didn't want to work there. It was the job I didn't want, and I got it. And I tried to not take it, and it was a very interesting situation. But I worked at this wealthy church, but I had a chip on my shoulder. And John brought that up, and then he, later on, when we were all together with some of the other men, he brought it back up with all of them. And the thing that hit me like a ton of bricks I didn't expect is he said, Andy, if God made you and called you to be known as trailer trash for the rest of your life, would you follow him? Or would that be where you'd said, no, I won't go with you? And I didn't know. It hit me. I didn't think this was that big of a deal, but all of a sudden I realized I've been fighting being viewed as trailer trash my whole life, and I really don't want to do that. When I was in high school, I worked a full-time job so I could have a nice car and so I could have nice clothes because I was sick of being, trailer trash.
For sure.
And I was kind of, my big goal was get off the dirt road, get out of the trailer, get a house that's attached to the ground, never look back, never speak of this again, And so I'd been doing that, but then I had this disdain for people who had money. So if you were, I mentioned this at our church a while back. I don't know if you were there for that one or not, but we were talking about unity, and I was talking about the things that disunify us. And so I was saying, look, if your parents bought you a car, I couldn't stand you. I thought you were weak. I despised you. So I had this thing where, I wanted nice things, but then when people were handed them because they had a good life and their parents made good decisions, boy, I hated it. I was so angry. And so it alienated me from all kinds of relationships because just this jealousy and anger. And so I couldn't, I couldn't just appreciate somebody who had more material resource than me. And then I was just driven to be wealthy. And, and I wouldn't have called it that, but really that's kind of what it was. So when John brought that up, I struggle with emotion. I'm not tapping into emotion isn't my everyday experience. But I just fell apart. The thought that God might want me to be viewed as trailer trash for the rest of my life, that thought just destroyed me. I wept. I was angry. It was like fear, terror, anger, confusion, panic, all in one. And I had never felt that flood before, and I realized this is a big deal. And John kind of looked over and he said, "This is a spiritual issue for you," something to that effect. Like, will you walk with God if He calls you there, or is this as far as it goes? Or is your allegiance given to someone else? And he said, and for those of you listening who, maybe you struggle with kind of connecting the spiritual dots or whatever. I know this might sound fantastic, but he said something to the degree of, I think you made a deal with the devil. And the truth is, like, somewhere in my life, I made this conscious decision: I will never be viewed as trailer trash. And what he was suggesting was that was a spiritual decision I made. It wasn't just I don't want to be looked at this way. It was a spiritual decision where I said, to myself, I thought, but there was a spiritual element to this. Like, I will only follow God in certain situations, not all. I'll follow Him if He gives me money. I'll follow Him if He takes me away from here. I'll follow Him if my reputation isn't that of a poor guy. And John was suggesting that was actually a spiritual dark influence in my life, encouraging me to do something that would actually put me in a place of bondage. It would cause shame and damage. And he was absolutely right. That had been the thing that had made me feel shame. It had damaged me. It had alienated me from God and other people. And somehow in that moment I realized, this is killing me. Like, this is the inner thing that's killing me. And it's not just about trailers, and it's not just about cars. This is about God. And so he said, could you pray right now and give your life to God in this way of saying, God, if you want me to be viewed as trailer trash for the rest of my life, I'll follow after you. And I thought, I can't. But then there was this other thought in me that was like, if I don't do this, then I have no interest in following Jesus. Yeah. And I have to. And I said, I'll try. And I prayed that prayer, and just, stammering, like, here I am. I was in ministry, right? I'm like I'm this guy. I get up and I talk about the Bible and teach it. And, hey, here's what the Greek word means, guys. And then here I am, falling apart at the thought of saying, I'll be viewed as trailer trash, God, if that's what you want. And I'm slobbery, snot, weeping mess trying to say that. But I did. And I think God helped me see that. And John was used by God to help. And the other men who were there were supporting. And it was this great picture of community and God and spiritual leadership all happening on my behalf. And, I know they were praying for me and have prayed for me. And a lot of those guys walked with me for years through that and would ask me about it. And it was just a key moment. It dawned on me, hey, I'm talking about this on a podcast that who knows who will listen to it. We don't have this huge audience, but I would not have done this. Yeah. I would not have wanted to have this conversation. And then we did a video for our church a couple years ago that included a little bit of my story, and there's just a brief moment of me kind of in a trailer park talking about that. And I remember thinking when we were doing that, I just remember thinking, God, this might seem like nothing to other people, but I know, like, you saved me from my allegiance to my sin, and you saved me from my allegiance to being deceived, because I'm letting this be known, which is what you asked me to do, for whatever reason, whatever reason it is. Because, gosh, I would have wanted to be the pastor that people looked at just because of this journey, that people went, wow, Andy, you're put together, you're educated, you know what you're talking about. Doing this feels like the opposite. Yeah. Saying, hey, everybody, guess what? I grew up in an uneducated family who failed, and we lived in the trailer parks for a good chunk of my life. And so, therefore, when my college fund was cashed out at the bank, it was $2.50, and so I took that to McDonald's, bought a burger, and said, well, there was my college fund. And I went and worked at a car stereo shop, and then God just hounded me and didn't leave me alone, and I ended up coming into ministry. But guess what, everybody? There's my credentials. That's what I've got.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have let it happen. And so, interestingly, for me to follow Jesus, that's been a huge piece, is letting that happen.
Did that make it easier? We talked about transparency last week with leadership.
Yeah.
Going through that, was it easier to be in a place where, like, you could be just completely open about, like, not just this struggle, definitely this struggle, but other struggles as well?
Sorry, I took another bite
No,
of
you
delicious
you
sandwich.
deserve it. You've been
It was great.
going to town.
Absolutely. And I think that's the interesting thing is what I've noticed, and now I see it in Scripture too. It's not like God would show up in somebody's life and just say to them, hey, here's the list. 7,500 things that are wrong with you and that you do wrong, and ways in which you don't worship me, and ways in which you don't love others, and I'd like you to stop all those things and start doing the right things. That's not how it goes.
Yeah.
And what I see over and over, and what I've seen in my life, and I see it in the lives of others and in the Bible, is this: that God will enter in one thing at a time, expose something in our hearts that proves to be what we would call sin, which doesn't mean, it's the most ugly, heinous, and horrific thing. Because my story could have led me to be very hardworking and very wealthy, which many in our culture would view as a great motivation.
Yeah, true.
But the truth is that it was, to God, it was a refusal.
Yeah.
And so we would call that sin. And so he exposed that one thing in me, and kind of the invitation. Well, that must mean I'm making a good point. That's Brian's cool sound effect.
Yeah, whenever he's about to make an inspirational point,
yeah,
my phone goes off. I apologize about that.
No worries. No, it seems as if God tackles one thing at a time in our lives, and I think you'd notice this if you're a believer in God and you walk with Him, or you're not. It's like one thing at a time in your life. I mean, sometimes there's just a tsunami of things, but a lot of times there will be this one big thing that's exposed in you. I'm afraid of death. I've lost my job. Who am I? Right? Like, I've been rejected. What does that mean about me? One thing at a time that brings up the big questions and brings up the big fears. And that the invitation from God in those moments is not just like, hey, look at your whole life and get everything together. It's, do you see who you really are here? Do you see the brokenness here? And then there's this invitation to follow after me. And the amazing thing about the way that God does that is he isn't looking at you. He didn't look at me that day, I believe, from Scripture and experience. He didn't look at me and say, come on, Andy, quit refusing to follow me and just get it right. What the message was, Andy, when I came to earth and I bore the scorn and I bore the shame, and people looked at me and saw me as an unqualified Savior, I was entering in, I was being strong, and I was bearing your burdens for you. And then I rose from the dead. I defeated death. I defeated shame. I defeated guilt. I defeated your spiritual enemy. I defeated the darkness, so that when you give over to it, I can forgive you. That your sin can be put on my back because I was strong enough to carry it, and I entered in on your behalf. So Jesus is kind of saying, like, you do need to change, but I'm going to carry you there. I'm going to give you the power. I'm going to give you the possibility because of what I've done. And so yes, to your question, that one thing was huge for me, and it was an invitation from God, and then learning to trust Him in that, to walk into that, and then start to be honest with people about my story, taught me I could trust Him next time, and it has not stopped. if there's a Christian out there who's ever been told that walking with Jesus is like an easy thing that you start doing and you feel better, I'm sorry to burst your bubble. It's not. Because he's going to invite you to continually lay down your life. Because that's what Jesus did himself. He laid down his life. That's the way he served. That's the way he loved his Father. That's the way he loved us. And so he calls us to walk in the same way. So if we're going to love other people and we're going to love God, it's going to be a laying down of ourselves. And it leads to ultimate joy. It really does free you, right? But so, ever since then, it's just been, I thought, I got over my big hurdle. Nope. There was another one, and another one, and another one. And, even, in the last couple weeks, there have been things that just have come front and center. And actually, not even the last couple weeks. Last night, I seriously laid down in bed, and we'd watched too much television. But I had made this kind of resolve on our little trip that I was going to not watch television up until bedtime, but I was going to spend more time with my wife, talking with her, praying with her before we went to bed, make that time intentional. And it dawned on me last night when I laid down, 1 week later I'm not doing it. What's wrong with me? So here I am, 34, not that old, but the call to follow Jesus and to lay things down has not diminished. It's becoming more particular. And I'm starting to see the sin in everything I do. And you'd think that just would be depressing, but it honestly is it's just true. It's just, it's a true it makes sense of my heart to say, no, I'm completely self-reliant, and so often I do damage. And it brings me back to asking Jesus to forgive me, asking other people to have mercy on me. And so, it continues, for sure. So, that was a key moment, but it continues.
Awesome. I want to give you some time to munch on it. I don't like to talk too much because I hate hearing myself talk, and if I want to listen and to it, because I love hearing you, and I love hearing Eric Siepen share their thoughts about whatever we're talking about. But I want to give you, like I said, room to talk. So I'll share a similar experience where it wasn't poverty per se, or being a trailer trash, or whatever. For me, and this happened within the past couple of years. I think it was 2012, 2013. Maybe it was 2014. There's just so much that's happened in all those past years. I've been a Christian ever since I was really young, and thankfully I didn't have a moment where I strayed and I was like, I'm not going to do the Jesus thing. Nothing else made sense for me to do, but and I never felt, thankfully, entitled. I had a lot of people that kept me thinking just because you grew up in this, you probably, because a lot of times you're going to know a lot less than people who have experienced it for such a short amount of time. But I didn't fully grasp it in different ways. It's as if I forgot that confession and repentance was going to be something that until and I'm going to toil until I die, and that it would be a continuing ethic in my life. And there's several moments where it was just epiphanies that made me remember that. In 2014, 2015, I was I just went through this last year where I was having this conversation of I'm still in it. One of them was singleness. My first girlfriend was in December, and I was 26 years old. So I'm still 26 because my birthday's November. And I wanted to get married when I was 18.
Me too, man.
Yeah,
that's what I thought I would do.
And now I'm 26. I'll be 27 in November. And it was a conversation that I had around that time. Was am I still going to follow the Lord if He doesn't have someone for me?
Yeah.
And it was definitely a worthwhile conversation to have, and because we just never know. But it was there you go. How was it?
Oh, it was great. Thanks for that space.
Of course.
I was obviously hungry. I finished the sandwich pretty quick.
Yeah.
Anyway, continue.
I'm just waiting for a train to pop up right before I make my point.
Yeah.
No, but I have an amazing point to make. Just like, it was a conversation that I had to have as well, that I continue to have. Every time that I just think, like, because I'll just remind myself of just all these things, 'cause it's so evident of my setbacks and my weaknesses, and it can be really, really overwhelming.
Yeah.
But thankfully, God's not harping on that, and He just allows there to be freedom to fail, and then He's like, I'm going to love you regardless, and I'm going to carry you through this.
Yeah.
And just hold fast to me and my steadfast love, and you're not going to have to feel the burden of this.
Yeah.
So that's an incredible encouragement. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and the interesting thing with stuff like singleness is, and then it can feel like God's keeping me from my heart's desire, which is how I felt in my situation I shared and many others. But the truth that's continually worked out again in Scripture, and we see it in life experiences. A couple people who are looking for their heart's desire get together and they get married, right? And then it turns out this person doesn't meet my heart's desire, and there's just this huge letdown, and there can be, And what is truly deep and meaningful is when your heart's desire is met in relationship to God. And what can happen there is that then you could be single, or you could be married, right? You could go either way. But in both cases, if you're married, your heart is getting fed and filled from outside of yourself and outside of this person, because the call to marriage is the call to die and to lay your life down for someone else. And so if you're looking for your heart's fulfillment, but the call is to die, that's going to be a real struggle for you.
Yeah.
But if you can say, even that stammering, struggling, God, I will seek my fulfillment in you. I will return to you. I'll come back to you over and over again. Then you have a resource to share with someone. And so you could be single and share that with your friends and your community. You could be married and share that in the community of family and children, because then children come in, and what are they? They're little. Yeah, well, no, I mean, but they're these little incredible blessings that require the death of you every single day. That you have to give your life to serve and care for them, and a good portion of their life they won't have the wherewithal to return that to you. You teach them to do that. Which demands a lot of you, and demands that you have learned how to give your life, so that when you teach them, they don't go, "What, Dad? You don't do that." They have to look at you and say, your words match your actions. You really do lay down your life. So when you tell me to lay down mine, at least I can hear that, and I can see it. And so the wisdom of God is so deep. I don't know what your journey will be. But it's interesting that sometimes the very thing that we want the most is what God withholds. And I think that there's a lot of people angry with God, I think, within the church, outside of the church, for this very reason. Because why'd you take this from me? Why didn't you give me what I wanted?
Yeah. Especially when it's a good desire, because that was one of the thoughts. I was like, it was a God-given desire. That's something to be celebrated and be excited about. The marriage, because that what a great representation of the church, but relationship with God. But so that's what made it even more difficult. And I was like, sometimes God doesn't give us what we want, and I had to experience that over and over again. I grew up poor too, and thankfully on that aspect of it, I don't really there'll be times where I'm like, I'll just have the nicest thing, and I don't care. I'll go back and forth, but thankfully it hasn't marked my life in so many other ways that I need to
it didn't become a big theme.
Exactly.
And which is true for other. I've known other people that grew up in the trailer park, and they're just like, well, fine, whatever.
Yeah. I've got a condo now. It's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've got a window.
condo.
That's no. But
Sweet.
sweet, dude. Windows, man. But
Dual pane and everything.
yeah,
Whoa.
yeah, with blinds
With
and
blinds.
curtains,
And they work.
It was
the blinds
overkill.
work.
Yeah.
Whoa,
yeah.
that's awesome.
I know, right? But
Yeah, it's interesting how like with some of this, like following Jesus as a single person can set you up to either be married or not, right?
Yeah.
Well, similarly, I mean, in my situation with the being poor thing, I'm not wealthy compared to a large swath of our community. In world standards, we all are. But it's dawned on me lately that I have been entrusted with more now than I maybe would have expected. And so I think we've talked before on the podcast, like I'm a small business owner. And I think if I had become a small business owner, so I'm a pastor and a small business owner, those are two separate things.
Yeah.
My church is not a business. But if I had been following the trajectory I was on, my business would have been all about me and making me look good and getting me money and making me not look like a failure, right?
yeah,
And I think that just would have been the poison that would have just made it horrible. I mean, I probably would have, I don't know what kind of business practices would have come out of that demand that I had, right?
For sure.
And so, interestingly, like, I have these memories of my dad and having, there was the wealthy business owner that didn't look out for the employees. And, I always wished, and my dad was a little bit, he would kind of complain about this, which was unfortunate, but I always wish somebody would just look out for my dad over themselves. That the guy who owned the business, who drove in his nice Cadillac, and my dad's car like is burning oil, but my dad worked so hard to serve this company, and I wished that owner would like sacrifice a little bit of his own to take care of my dad. And I know how, and the other guys that worked with him, not just my dad. But it's like, all of a sudden, here I am, a small business owner, and going, whoa, now that's me. I'm that guy that's my calling.
And I have that incredible opportunity to pay that forward.
Right. And it's hard because now I get the complexity on both sides, that those small business owners, they have a ton of bills and all this different stuff, and and they I don't even know if they drove new Cadillacs. And now I realize Cadillacs depreciate so much. Maybe they bought the cheapest car on the market. I don't know. So I kind of wonder, if maybe I was too hard on them. But then at the same time, there are opportunities for me where, my wife and I have had these discussions recently of, is this business, is our main goal to move it toward a more profitable place for ourselves, or is the main goal to care for our people, our employees? And we only have a couple, but this journey that God's had me on, I think He was preparing me to serve as a business owner instead of to try to demand that the business serve me.
Yeah.
And that is just such a different place. And if He hadn't taken me through this painful journey of withholding what I wanted for so long, I don't think I could have been ready for this.
Yeah.
So the withholding, and He could have. Interestingly, we don't live in a mobile home park, but that one day when I was weeping, I was like, oh shoot, God is sending me back, right?
Yeah.
And that could still happen. I'm only 34, it could happen. But at this point, we don't. And so it's like He demanded that surrender. God did, I believe. And then, in a way, like, handed me something like of high responsibility and said, kind of, now that you have surrendered, I want you to go and steward this well.
Yeah.
And then there's the realization that for other people, when they surrender it, He actually invites them right in to the middle of it. And we, I don't know, and it could be taken from me. I have no idea. So it's just it's interesting, but I'm coming to believe more and more that He's doing good things, even and especially when He's demanding a lot from us. It's the kind of love that a good father gives. They withhold the thing that's killing their child. The child wants, ice cream every night, and they say no, not because they just hate the kid, but because they go, I don't want you to live a life addicted to sugar.
Yeah.
And I think God is in the kind of business of shaping us into the kind of people we ought to be and need to be, and that's a painful, disciplinary life for us. But one day we'll look at Him and say, "Thank you."
Definitely. So, an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your story with that aspect of it.
Yeah.
And there will be other times where Pastor Eric won't be able to join us, and there will be times when Pastor Eric, it'll be just me and him, and we'll be able to dive into his story too, and dive more into what Andy's been through, and get to know him a little bit more, and how God has shaped his life. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for joining me for breakfast, faith over breakfast.
Yeah, you got it, man. Thank you. You need to finish your bread there,
I
or
know.
maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe.
I'm going to. This is delicious. At first you hadn't had barely any of it, so I didn't want to be like, yeah, and just like
Chomping
demolish
on your
it. So, and also just like, yeah, sometimes it's loud, and I wanted to make sure that I was being intentional and listening. So,
well, thanks, man. Well, and thank you for sharing a little bit of your story in the midst of this, and we'll have to,
yeah, the tables might turn. We'll see.
Yeah. The host might become the interviewee here one of these days. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm not going to listen to that podcast, but
maybe you need to. Maybe this is one of your issues. Well, offline we'll talk about that.
Yeah,
more.
for sure. Well, my voice just sounds weird to me. That's all. But
oh man, you have no idea. Like, I have all these recordings up online from the church, and it's just painful. Like, I think everyone hates their voice. If somebody out there loves their voice, like, wow, good for you, happy for you. I think most of us are a little bit thrown off.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel. Yeah. Anyway, I understand, and
sure.
I'm still baffled that people just pay me to talk, because it's like you just inflict pain on yourself. You pay me to.
I know. Yeah.
I'm kidding. Hey, thanks for joining us for Faith Over Breakfast. Brian, thanks for hosting. And XO Coffee, thanks for your loft space. We miss you, Eric. Hope you have a great vacation.
And we'll see you next week.
Yep.
That'd be great.
Doing it again next week.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
All right.
Have a good day.